the lives of stars. We've been already kind of talking about stars, how stars are born. So this is my sun. So in order for, so what, if this is our sun, what's happening in the core of our sun?
Nuclear fusion.
Nuclear fusion, yes, exactly. So all stars are kind of like that. Now, before our sun turned on, called nuclear fusion began, it needed to have the high enough temperature and high enough pressure. Okay, so all stars are kind of like that. This actually is an aging star, and when I first started teaching this, I thought nebula. We're familiar with a nebula, right? Gas in outer space. And then they have these proper names, like this is called the Ant Nebula. I'm like, okay, so there's a type of nebula called a, no, that's the proper name. It's like Ant Nebula because it kind of looks like an ant. So anyway, they're clever. They give these names to them. I don't know if kids give these names, but anyway. So if I draw, I think I'll go ahead and draw it right quick because we'll be talking about it. So what sort of diagram is this? HR diagram. Cool stars. I'm going to go ahead and draw, I won't draw the line, but these represent stars. So what kind of stars are these? Perfect. Main sequence. And then what sort of stars are these? Giants, supergiants, yep. And then what sort of stars are these? White dwarfs, yes. Very good. So we're going to see HR diagrams today in today's lecture. Oh, there it is. Okay. This actually then would be a later phase. This would be like a giant phase because it's going to be relatively cool, but it's going to be relatively bright. Cool and bright because over here we have luminosity. Cool. I just have some pictures here. Okay. So this would be what it says, hydrogen burning core. You guys told me nuclear fusion, right, for our sun. Specifically, the type of fusion is hydrogen fusion. Does that make sense? Hydrogen fusion. So when it burns hydrogen, do you guys remember what it makes? Helium. Yep. So it makes helium. Now, eventually the star is going to run out of hydrogen in the hot region. It's actually got fresh hydrogen outside the core, but it's not hot enough to fuse that hydrogen, but it runs out. So what happens then is we end up with a core of helium, okay, because it came from the hydrogen fused together to make helium. And now we have an orange region around here. Actually, for a while, is this right? Yeah. For a while then, we have helium here. This is after it's done in a while. Form hydrogen, plus hydrogen goes to form helium. We have helium core, and we have fresh hydrogen here. Kind of between, what I'm not saying is we have kind of a shrinking process. So basically this, we call this shell. This is shell hydrogen begins fusing. How does it begin fusing? Well, the shrinking process increased the pressure and the temperature around that helium core. Okay, we call that shell hydrogen fusion. Cool. I don't think, is this, so you guys don't have this slide, do you? Okay. Well, yes, you do. Yeah, I was thinking of a different side. Okay, so I want to stick this in there somewhere. If I were to ask you kind of the low-end mass of a star, hopefully you would tell me 0.08. 0.08, yeah. Do you remember what the high mass is? 100, 150, yeah. 150 solar masses, 100 solar masses. Yeah, it's kind of squishy. But 0.08 solar masses, if it's less than 0.08 solar masses, remember we talked about the brown dwarfs? To me, that's kind of what it ends up as a brown dwarf. It's less than 0.08 solar masses. But now between 0.08 and 0.4 solar masses, something interesting happens. The video we've already watched talked about red dwarfs. Where on the HR diagram are the red dwarfs? Anybody remember? Yep, these are the red dwarfs. Yep. Extend this. I think it kind of goes around like that. These guys are the red dwarfs. And of course, as I have temperature hot to cold, you guys would be, oh, be fine, guy or girl, kiss me. We have those kind of 7 spectral types. Yep. So these M-type stars, these red dwarfs, they actually do something a little bit different. Instead of having kind of that helium core build up, what they do is the helium, they're kind of low mass, so the helium, what we say, convects out and fresh hydrogen convects in. Now this is limited to up to 0.4 solar masses. So with that convection, I don't know if you remember, we talked about convection before. We talked about kind of plate tectonics. Convection is a lava lamp. Convection is a lava lamp where something that's warm rises, okay, it cools down, and as it cools down, it wants to sink because it's less dense, or excuse me, more dense. Okay, heats up, becomes less dense, wants to rise. Okay, so that's convection. So what happens in these red dwarfs is basically the helium, which is kind of spent, the product of hydrogen fusion. The helium convects out and fresh hydrogen convects in. So these guys actually have a different order to their life than kind of what else I'm going to show you. So 0.4 solar masses to 0.08 solar masses, this is kind of what we have. Okay. So beyond 0.4 solar masses, something else happens. And I already kind of told you a minute ago, this thing we call shell hydrogen fusion happens with a star that is more massive than 0.4 solar masses. But something even more interesting happens. And actually, I'll go ahead and kind of introduce you to that idea here. Now, this is not a low mass. This is not a red dwarf star. I'm kind of stepping up now to a normal star, like what our star is going to do. So what's going to happen is our star is going to run out of fresh hydrogen in its core in about 5 billion years. Okay, it's going to then contract. Okay, and it probably will have that shell fusion right there. It will contract and it will expand. And I can't remember. I think it's the red giant phase of our sun is going to be out. Is it between Mars and Jupiter? I don't know, but it's going to swell past the Earth. So we need to have a new home by then. But then what's going to happen is even though it's swelling on the outside, it's contracting on the inside. So our star is going to do one more thing with that helium core. With that helium core, it's going to go ahead and begin fusing helium, and it's going to form carbon. What's the symbol for the element carbon? C. Yep, it's going to form carbon and oxygen. What's the symbol for oxygen? Oh, yeah. So that's what our sun's going to do in about 5 billion years. And that's what stars that are more massive than 0.4 times the mass of our sun do. So what do we mean by something in its giant stage? So the thing I was telling you about our sun swelling, that's our sun swelling, giant, super giant, okay? So we kind of have some relative sizes here. There's the sun. So I was thinking about this. Do you guys remember the name of the star? If you take the Big Dipper, and here's the bowl, and here's the handle, you arc to a star called Arcturus. Yay, awesome. That star called Arcturus is in the constellation Bootes. Okay, so I just mentioned all that. So another star, I don't think this is Arcturus, but Delta, I don't know if you're familiar with the Greek alphabet. I'm not, okay, but I know we've got Alpha, Beta, is Gamma? Okay, and then maybe it's Delta. I don't know, I kind of lose track. Oh, yes, we have confirmation. So what they do with stars is your brightest star in a constellation would be Alpha Bootes, and then Beta Bootes, which sounds kind of funny, and then Gamma Bootes and Delta Bootes, kind of like that. So this would be the 4th brightest star in that constellation. And you can kind of see relatively size-wise, it definitely looks like a giant, okay? Now, it's relatively cool, okay? The outer edge is kind of cool, but the reason it's so luminous is because dang, the thing is just humongous. So it's got more surface area to shine. Well, there's that one, and then there's this one. And you can't see the whole thing. What your author's done is to kind of give you a sense for, okay. So this is Chi, which I'm not sure where that comes in the scheme of the Greek letters. But Cygnus, anybody see Cygnus, the swan, this semester? Yeah. So this would be in the constellation Cygnus, and it's Chi-wise with regard to how bright it is. Okay, so, okay. All right, so what's this constellation? Orion, yep. And Orion, it has a bright star. I'm thinking It's called Betelgeuse, like Betelgeuse, 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 yeah. And it's this orange star, and it actually is a giant star too. So this is kind of showing you relative to kind of how big is Betelgeuse. Well, here's the size of the star down to scale, and Earth's orbit is like this. So does that make sense that if we were orbiting Betelgeuse, we would be in the star's atmosphere? See how that works? And even our first gas giant, Jupiter, they would also be swallowed by this star as it swelled, as it, what we call, left the main sequence. Now, things that leave the main sequence have run out of hydrogen to fuse. That's why they leave the main sequence. Okay? All right. So this actually is a slide from part 3, so you don't have this slide. So what is this diagram we see here? It's like maybe an HR diagram, hopefully. You can kind of see the axes. We have hot stars, cool stars. We have increasing luminosity along the y-axis. Now, I brought this in because I actually remember I said it wrong the other day. What direction, these are stars, are they coming or going, coming from or going on to the main sequence? They're going on to the main sequence. You can kind of see the little arrows here. Okay, yep, exactly. So this is actually a slide I showed you before. I grabbed it from a previous part. So these are actually what? Protostars that are arriving at the main sequence. Protostars. Not quite, not have nuclear fusion, going on to the main sequence. So what do you think if we look at this, these are the more, you guys would hopefully probably tell me that these are more massive, right? More massive. And these are less massive. Which ones, can you tell from here, where the dates actually, the times are written on, like 10 to the 4th is what, 10,000? 10 to the 3rd is 1,000, 10 to the 2nd is 100. So we compare that to these actually, so these would be red dwarfs. So we have 10 to the 8th, okay? Which one takes longer to go from a protostar and become a main sequence? It takes longer. Yeah, these guys. These take longer to get to the main sequence. This is actually a follow-up question. We'll be talking more about this today. Which one, though, takes longer to leave the main sequence? Red dwarfs. They take longer to get there, and they take longer to leave the main sequence. Exactly. Perfect. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm switching up. So you guys see the arrows? What's different about these arrows? They're leaving the main sequence. So I want you to, if you see something like this, I want you to think about it ran out of hydrogen to fuse in its core. We also have some dates. You guys told me that down here, these red dwarfs, they take longer to leave the main sequence. I'll start with this. This is 1 solar mass. This dot right here would be our sun. 1 solar mass, that's our sun. Okay, 10 times 10 to the 9th, let's see. 10 to the 9th they do on purpose because that's 1 billion, right? So here we have 10 billion years for it to leave the main sequence. That's exactly what I've been saying. We're about halfway through 10 billion years. Okay? Let's compare that to something that is actually 15 times the mass of our sun up here. 15 times the mass of our sun, and we have 1 times 10 to the 7th. So how much is 1 times 10 to the 7th, you guys? Unpack that. Did I do that right? Okay. Yep, see, I get my billions and millions mixed up. What do you think? What is it? How many years is this? It's 10 million with an M, yeah. So what we're saying is 10 million versus 10 billion. Yeah. So anyway, very good. All right. Look like a cluster. Would you call that a globular cluster or an open cluster? I'm thinking globular. Yep. This is actually located in the constellation Centaur, which I think we don't see it here in the northern hemisphere. Several million stars there. Globular clusters are so cool. Globular clusters, that one looks like it's almost zoomed in too much. I like it when it's zoomed in a little bit more. If we zoom it in a little bit more even, we see this. This is like the heart of this globular cluster. So what did we say about colors of stars? Those red stars, are they cool or hot?
Cool.
They are cool. Those red stars are cool. Those red stars are the giants. Okay. So what do you think? You think this is a globular or an open cluster? I'm thinking open, yep. This one's cool. I think this is one that I might have seen through the telescope. It's called the Jewel Box Open Cluster. Again, it's kind of like the Ant Nebula. They just give names to these open clusters that what they look like. We talked about Messier objects. There's another set of objects called the NGC objects. It's just a catalog. Messier is just a catalog. NGC is just a catalog. So this would be 4755. So yeah, an open cluster. Again, you can kind of see stars at different stages of their lives here. So based upon this, what do you think? If we assume that the red there is because it's a red giant, do you think that that is a higher mass star or a lower mass star than the blue ones? How many people think it's a higher mass star than the blue ones? I do too. Why do you think it's a higher mass star than the blue ones? Because it's almost the same size? Well, and because the higher mass ones, we know the higher mass ones live shorter lives. Yep. And if leaving means it's dying, then it must be leaving and dying because it's a higher mass. Does that make sense? Yep. Let's see, short lives. And this is long lives. Yep. Okay. So here we have an HR diagram. This is what's, now we're kind of getting down to a little bit what scientists like to do, make a scatter plot of a cluster, whether it's a globular cluster of stars or an open cluster of stars that were born about the same time in the same giant molecular cloud, in the same stellar nursery. So each of these dots represents a star that is a member of that open cluster. Okay. Now, actually a little bit ago, I kind of showed you from the previous slide where we had kind of stars still coming on to from out here. These would be protostars. That's my point I was trying to make. These guys are protostars. Okay? They haven't arrived at the main sequence yet. These guys are on the main sequence, just humming along. Now, this is a relatively young, it hasn't aged, it's pretty young. I know that because clear up here, we have a massive star that has not yet left the main sequence. It's still humming along. If this was and we're going to see some pictures here, or diagrams here of clusters that are older, you're going to see that these heavy ones have peeled off. Okay, so this is kind of a young one. These guys haven't even arrived at the main sequence yet. So this, I've tried to image this, no success yet. Okay, but it's called the Christmas tree cluster. And to me, I don't see it here as much as I see it here. This to me looks like the Christmas tree, where I think this looks like the base and it kind of goes up, and that's could be your little angel on the top. So what do you think? To me, this looks like an upside down Christmas tree.
I can see it as like just the tip being the Christmas tree.
But this could be the tip up here?
No, like
this is the tip?
That's just the tree.
Yeah. So like this looks,
Yeah.
I think this looks more like a Christmas tree to me. Yeah. So what do you think? Globular or open? Open. Yep. Can you see some nebulosity there? Yep, me too. That's so pretty. So if we take this and we slap those stars onto an HR diagram, this is what they look like. Okay, again, it's a scatter plot. You're like, well, Mrs. Snipes, that doesn't look like there's a straight line between those, and you're right. There's variation, but they generally have kind of this main sequence sort of place here. Now, right here, though, I'm kind of seeing no heavy stars up here. Now, whether they have left and they're just not showing them over here, or whether when this giant molecular cloud made all these stars, there were no heavy ones, I'm not sure. So what this says, the reason I brought this one in is it says that this figure, which is 2210, let's see, the theoretical observation similar. Compare this, although, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. So this is this one, and this is this one. Now remember, what are these guys over here? What did I say about these stars? They're protostars. Yep, they haven't yet arrived. Okay. Now I'd ask you open or globular, but this one, I'm pretty sure this one is in, if it had his Messier number, I might know. I'm pretty sure it's in Sagittarius. So, and I'm not sure which it is. So what do you think? What about these little cluster of stars over here? Just in context of what we've been talking about, what do you think these little clusters of stars over here? This little cluster. Yeah, I'm thinking red giants. I think they have left because they're heavier stars. I think that they are red giants up there. All right. So I kind of said I used the term peel off. You know, peel off. These guys are going to peel off first. These guys next. These guys peel off next. These guys peel off next. Actually, there's a term to that. Instead of peel off, it's called a turn off point. I guess I don't have a, does it say turn off?
Middle.
The middle?
Yeah. It says main sequence and turn off towards the red giant.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, where they peel off, where they turn off, that's called the turn off point. And does this make sense that the lower the turn-off point means it's had more time for even those lighter stars to go ahead and leave the main sequence? The higher the turn-off point means that it's not as old. So you can clearly see this turn-off point. Again, when you see an HR diagram like this, this is a cluster of stars that were born about the same time. I went ahead and went out and got a picture of this cluster 47 Tucane, and this is what it looks like. So what do you think, globular or open? Globular, yeah. And this actually is two photos where you might see this box, this inset is this picture, or the close-up is this one. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. And it's going to actually kind of take us forward into the next part. So no homework.